welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Imagine a place where even death freezes before it can touch you. Gale Carter didn't need to imagine he was living that nightmare. The wind howled through the cracked visor of his thermal suit like a dirge, each frigid gust piercing his flesh like 1,000 icy needles. That suit, once humanity's proudest technological marvel, designed to withstand the harshest environments, was now a tattered heap of metal, its power cells draining faster than any simulation had predicted. His ship, Aurora's Blade, had erupted into a cloud of ash hours ago, leaving him stranded on this nameless, ice-bound planet of forsaken hell where sunlight was a distant memory, and cold reigned supreme. He trudged through the thick snow, legs numb, lips purple and trembling with every agonizing breath. 5 miles back, the wreckage of his ship smoldered beneath the ice, buried like an unmarked grave. The emergency beacon still hummed, sending faint pulses into the void, but Gale knew the truth: no one was coming. Not in this dead corner of the cosmos, not in the time he had left. If he wanted to live, he'd have to save himself. Frost coated his visor, blurring his vision, but through the haze, he spotted a flickering light amidst the raging blizzard, not natural, but a flame, or something man-made. A fragile spark of hope ignited in his chest, a tiny ember against the overwhelming dark. Clenching his jaw, he forced his frozen legs forward, each step a battle against the cold that hungered to claim him. As he drew closer, he saw it, a ramshackle structure cobbled from scrap metal and gray stone, like the scavenged remains of an ancient ship. Thin smoke curled from a vent in the roof, promising precious warmth within. Gale didn't hesitate. He stumbled to the entrance, pounding the metal surface with trembling fists. No response. He struck again, harder, his hoarse voice barely audible over the screaming wind. "Anyone in there? Please!" Silence. He sucked in a breath of biting air, fingers fumbling for the manual latch. If no one was inside, he wasn't about to freeze to death waiting for a miracle. The door's mechanism was stiff with ice, but after a few desperate yanks, it screeched open. A wave of warmth enveloped him, a salvational embrace. Gale nearly collapsed from relief, but then he froze, senses taut as a wire. In the dim room, a tall figure stood, firelight casting shadows on a body clad in pitch-black thermal fabric. Glowing yellow eyes locked onto him, sharp with surprise and raw irritation. Her pale blue skin shimmered faintly under the light, framed by short, curved horns jutting from her forehead and long black hair cascading like a mystic veil. An alien. Gale stiffened. He'd encountered plenty of extraterrestrials on his galactic expeditions, peaceful traders, ruthless predators, but her solitary presence in this desolate wasteland chilled him in a way the cold never could. "What are you doing here, human?" Her voice cut like a crystal blade, laced with hostility. Gale raised his hands, taking a shaky step forward. "My ship crashed a few miles back. I need shelter or I'll die." Her eyes narrowed, the golden glow flashing like lightning. "Not my problem." His stomach twisted, but he pressed on. "Please. I won't be trouble. Just let me warm up, I'll leave when the storm breaks." She crossed her arms, eyeing him with blatant suspicion, as if he were a plague-ridden beast. "And if I refuse?" He swallowed hard. No weapons, no strength to force her, nothing but a final plea. Outside, he'd be dead in an hour, maybe less. "Then I'd die," he admitted, voice a whisper, breath fogging white in the air. Silence stretched, heavy as the ice outside, broken only by the fire's faint crackle. Her gaze bore into him, probing, weighing. Then, with an exasperated sigh, she jerked her head toward a corner away from the fire. "Sit there. Don't touch anything. And don't think I'm doing this out of kindness." Gale didn't hesitate. He staggered inside, dragging the door shut with a shrill scrape, then collapsed near the fire. He peeled off his frost-crusted gloves, rubbing his pale fingers to coax sensation back. The heat stung as it seeped into his skin, a painful but welcome relief, like blood rushing through thawed veins. The alien woman watched from across the room, her sharp eyes untrusting, a wild creature poised to strike if he crossed the line. You're lucky I don't want human blood staining this place, she muttered, her tone icy. Gale exhaled shakily, warmth creeping into his chest. Yeah, lucky. She didn't reply, turning back to her task sorting a pile of small metal tools on a table. Gale took the chance to scan the room. The shelter was crude but functional, a central fire pit radiating feeble heat, metal crates of dried food and gear along the walls, a sleeping nook piled with thick furs likely from creatures native to this frozen world. Then it hit him, this wasn't a temporary refuge. She'd been here a long time too long. You're here alone? He asked, curiosity tinged with suspicion. She shot him a glance over her shoulder, irritation flashing in her eyes. Obviously. Why? He pressed, unable to stop himself. She stiffened, hands pausing over a metal shard. Then she turned away, voice flat and frigid. None of your business. Gale frowned but didn't push. He wasn't in a position to demand answers, not when his life hung on her reluctant mercy. Instead, he focused on warming himself, stretching his numb limbs as the fire's heat sank deeper. Silence settled, thick and tense, until she spoke again, her tone still sharp but less hostile. What's your name, human? Gale, he replied, looking up at her. Yours? She hesitated, as if debating whether to share it. Klyra, she said finally, voice even. Gale nodded slowly. Thanks, Klyra, for not letting me freeze out there. She snorted, a dry sound echoing in the small space. Don't thank me yet. I could still change my mind and toss you out. Despite the grim situation, Gale managed a faint, genuine smile. Fair enough. For now, he was alive, a small victory against the endless storm. Gale sat near the fire, rubbing his hands to cling to its fragile warmth, but the tension between him and Klyra hung as thick as the ice encasing this planet. She sat across from him, golden eyes scrutinizing him with unmasked wariness. Every instinct told Gale he was an unwelcome intruder, not just from her cold stare, but from the way she angled her body, hand resting near her tools, ready to turn them into weapons if he stepped out of line. Klyra broke the silence with a scoff, her voice slicing like a blade. I should have left you to freeze out there. Gale exhaled, stifling the irritation rising in his chest. Good thing you didn't. Don't mistake it for kindness, she snapped, her eyes flaring like wind-stoked flames. I don't like humans. You're just a walking pile of trouble. Gale tilted his head, keeping his cool. Lucky for me, I don't need you to like me. I just need you to let me stay until the storm dies down. Her laugh was harsh, joyless, scraping like metal on ice. The storm won't die soon, human. What do you mean? He asked, a bad feeling creeping up his spine. She jerked her chin toward the door, creaking under the wind's pressure. You think this is a normal blizzard? This planet doesn't work that way. Storms here last days, sometimes weeks. Hear that wind howling? We're stuck for a while, maybe longer than your frail little body can handle. Gale's heart sank like it had been dunked in ice water. If she was right, he wasn't just waiting out a few hours for rescue. It could be days, weeks even. He had no food, no spare gear, just a busted suit and dwindling hope. Great, he muttered, voice lost in the wind's roar. Klyra smirked, clearly enjoying his dismay. It wasn't a warm smile, just pure, cutting sarcasm. Still think you'll be leaving soon, human? Gale ran a hand through his short, messy hair, fighting off helplessness. What choice do I have? None, she said bluntly, her tone hard as a nail driven into ice. And you'd better not get in my way. I don't have the time or patience to babysit. Gale studied her closer, eyes narrowing. Something was off, not just her obvious hostility, but her presence here. The way she spoke, the way she stood firm in this wasteland, suggested she was used to the cold, the isolation, and dangers he hadn't yet seen. You've been here a long time, haven't you? He asked, voice lower, cautious. Klyra froze, hands hovering over her tools mid-motion. She didn't answer right away, instead tending the fire, stirring the glowing embers with a long metal rod. Long enough, she said at last, a bitter edge creeping in that he didn't miss. He caught the tone but knew better than to dig yet. Instead, he shifted gears, voice lighter. How'd you build this place? It doesn't look like something thrown together quick. I didn't build it, she huffed, the sound almost disdainful. I found it. Gale's brows shot up, surprised. You mean someone else was here before you? She shrugged, a casual motion that didn't hide a flicker of tension. Probably. They're gone now, dead or left, I don't care. Doesn't matter anymore. Gale scanned the shelter again, more carefully this time. The metal walls bore weathered scars, welds rusted over, some corners looking decades, maybe centuries, old. The thought unsettled him, a place once inhabited, now home only to Klyra. What happened to them? And why was she still here? But a more pressing issue loomed: she didn't trust him. If they were stuck together long term, that distrust could spell disaster. You really hate humans that much? He asked outright, dropping the pretense. Her eyes flashed, colder than the storm outside. She turned to face him, thin lips pressed tight before she answered. Yes. Gale snorted, unsurprised but still irked. Honest, at least. You asked? She shot back, lips curling into a humorless smirk, sharp teeth glinting in the firelight. He rubbed his temples, keeping his voice steady. Fine. I don't know what happened to you, and frankly, I don't care much. But we're stuck here together, and butting heads won't help either of us. She leaned back, arms crossed in a stance both defensive and defiant. I don't need your help. I've survived here alone longer than you can imagine, and I don't need a clumsy human screwing things up. Gale frowned, unable to resist pushing back. And if something out there attacks? You planning to handle it all solo? She faltered just for a split second, but he caught it. Her golden eyes flicked to the door, then back to him. There's nothing out there, she said, but her voice lacked conviction, as if she were convincing herself more than him. He smirked faintly, not letting her off easy. You don't sound too sure. Klyra's jaw tightened, claws flexing briefly before relaxing. Stay over there and don't touch anything. I'll decide if you're worth keeping around. Gale let out a dry laugh, the sound rough against the wind's howl. So my life's in your hands now? Yes, she said simply, no hesitation, her gaze locking onto him like a claim of dominance. He shook his head, leaning against the cold metal wall, the chill seeping through his torn suit. This'll be fun, he muttered. The storm wasn't letting up, and he had a sinking feeling it wasn't the only challenge ahead. The wind outside roared like a living beast, slamming the shelter with unrelenting fury. The metal walls groaned under the strain, shuddering with each gust, and Gale felt the cold creeping through the cracks despite the fire crackling in the center. His thermal suit was useless now, its internal heaters long dead, leaving him at the mercy of the fire's meager glow. He hugged his arms to his chest, trying to stop the shivers spreading through him. He hated feeling weak, but he was at his limit, muscles aching from the cold, each breath a white cloud dissolving before him. Klyra, by contrast, seemed untouched by the chill. She sat near the fire, legs crossed, stirring the red embers with a long metal rod, her calm eerie, as if the lethal storm outside were a passing breeze. Her pale blue skin gleamed under the firelight, a buried gem in this frozen tomb. Gale couldn't help but admire her resilience, though he'd keep that to himself while she glared at him like an invader. Finally, she looked up, golden eyes narrowing as she noticed his trembling. You're shaking, she said, voice flat but edged with mockery. Gale gave a dry chuckle, breath fogging. Yeah, turns out humans don't do great below zero for long. Shocking, right? She rolled her eyes, a slow, scornful gesture. Pathetic. Glad you're so concerned. He shot back, sarcasm masking his growing frustration, rubbing his hands harder to fend off the numbness. But his fingers were stiff, and the tiny fire couldn't hold back the cold clawing in from outside. Klyra watched him a moment longer, then sighed, rubbing her temple as if his existence were an unbearable burden. This is a waste of time. You won't make it through the night like this. Gale scowled, clinging to his battered pride. I'll manage. No, you won't, she snapped, rising with a swiftness that startled him. Humans are fragile, your body's shutting down. I can hear your heart slowing, your breath's getting shallow. You'll freeze solid before the storm peaks, and I'm not dragging your corpse out of here. He opened his mouth to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. His movements were sluggish, his mind fogged like frost on glass. His limbs felt leaden, every motion a painful struggle. He needed more heat, far more than this pitiful fire could give. He just didn't expect Klyra's solution to be so sudden or so bizarre. She huffed through her nose, face twisting in annoyance, as if she'd made a choice she despised. Can't believe I'm doing this, she muttered, so low he almost missed it. Before he could ask, she strode over, grabbed his collar with one hand, and yanked him forward. Her strength sent him stumbling, shock ripping a yell from his throat. Hey, what the hell? He staggered as she dragged him to the sleeping nook, his numb legs barely keeping up. She didn't answer. With a rough tug, she flung back the pile of thick furs on the crude bed, metal and scraps patched together, then shoved him onto it with zero gentleness. Gale hit the furs, their lingering warmth wrapping around him, but before he could process it, Klyra climbed in, pressing against him in the tight space. He froze literally and figuratively as her body pressed into his. Heat radiated from her like a living furnace, hotter than any human he'd known, thawing his icy limbs almost instantly. What are you doing? He stammered, heart pounding with confusion and alarm. Klyra scowled, golden eyes glaring like they could burn him. Shut up, human. We're freezing to death here. Get in bed. Gale blinked, floored by her outburst. What? No arguing, she barked, voice slicing through the air. Your weak body can't take this cold, and I'm not letting you die in my shelter. You're annoying enough alive, I don't need the hassle of burying you. Gale swallowed, mind reeling like he'd been caught in a whirlwind. He'd crashed on an ice planet, met a hostile alien hermit, and now he was in her bed, pressed close because she radiated heat like a mobile forge. A decade of space exploration, and he never pictured anything this insane. Klyra snorted impatiently, pulling the furs over them both, trapping the heat inside. Stop staring, she growled. This is survival, not because I like you. Gale shifted awkwardly, trying to keep some distance in the cramped space. Right, survival, he mumbled, voice unsteady. Her heat was unreal, pouring from her pale blue skin like a lifeline. Gale couldn't deny its effect. His shivers eased, his numb fingers prickled as sensation returned, blood pumping faster through his veins. But it was still damn uncomfortable. He lay rigid, barely daring to move, while Klyra rested beside him, breathing steady but tense, clearly no happier about this than he was. You don't have to act like it's the end of the world, she muttered, shooting him a side-eye glare. I don't like it either, human. But if you die, I'm stuck dealing with your body, and I hate wasting energy. Gale exhaled slowly, forcing himself to relax despite his spinning thoughts. As weird as it was, this heat was real and it was saving him. Thanks, he said quietly, voice rough from cold and exhaustion. She clicked her tongue, a sharp, dry sound. Don't make it weird. Gale let out a weak chuckle, breath faint. You're the one who dragged me into bed. Her glare intensified, claws twitching like a threat. I can still throw you out, don't test me. Gale wisely shut up, not pushing the fragile truce further. The storm raged on, battering the shelter like it wanted to tear it apart, but under the furs, Klyra's strange warmth gave him his first real shot at surviving the night, even if his reluctant companion clearly wished he'd dropped dead. Gale lay stiff as a board, mind grappling with the absurdity of it all. He was pressed against an alien he'd known for mere hours, wrapped in furs reeking of metal, and something alien, maybe the planet itself. Klyra's heat was intense, almost supernatural, seeping into his frozen muscles, pulling him back from the brink of icy death bit by bit. But it didn't ease the awkwardness. He kept as much distance as the tight space allowed, every slight shift making him hyper-aware of her blazing warmth. Klyra, meanwhile, seemed unbothered, or at least acted like it. Her eyes were shut, breathing even like a programmed machine, but her body stayed taut, claws flexing now and then, ready to react if he overstepped. She clearly hated this setup as much as he did, accepting it with a cold reluctance he wasn't sure whether to appreciate or fear. After a long, heavy silence, Gale couldn't hold back, his hoarse voice cutting through. Is this a trait of your species? Klyra's eyes snapped open, golden pupils glaring with familiar annoyance. What? She snapped, sharp enough to slice the question in half. The heat thing, he clarified, shifting for comfort but stopping when she shot him a warning look. You're burning up hotter than anything I've ever seen. Is that normal? She snorted, rolling her eyes with obvious disdain. It's biological adaptation. My kind evolved on a planet with extreme swings, scorching days, freezing nights. We generate heat to survive the cold seasons. Nothing special. Gale raised an eyebrow, curiosity overriding exhaustion. Huh, handy. Like a living heater. Not quite, she said dryly. I have to control it carefully. Generating heat burns energy, and right now I'm wasting it keeping your pathetic body from turning to ice. Gale smirked, unable to resist a jab. So you do care? She turned to him, eyes like daggers. I care about not sharing space with a rotting corpse. She fired back without missing a beat. If you die, it'll take forever to freeze solid in this cold, and I don't want your stench stinking up my shelter. Gale chuckled despite himself, the sound weak in the small space. Weird way to care. But I'm not complaining you're saving my life, whatever the reason. Klyra huffed in irritation, looking away. Sleep, human. I don't want to hear your babbling anymore. He almost argued reflex kicked in when ordered around, but exhaustion hit like a tidal wave. The warmth enveloping him, paired with the fading adrenaline from the crash, weighed his eyelids down. He didn't want to sleep, not with his lingering doubts about Klyra and this strange place, but his body wouldn't fight it. As he slipped toward darkness, a loud crash thundered outside, shaking the shelter. His eyes flew open, senses jolting awake. What was that? He whispered, heart racing. Klyra's face darkened, golden eyes glinting with alertness. Quiet, she ordered, voice low and cutting. Gale held his breath, listening. The storm still screamed, but something else cut through, heavy footsteps crunching thick snow, a deep growl rumbling through the thin metal walls. It wasn't wind or cracking ice, it was alive, menacing. What the hell is that? He murmured, fighting to keep his voice steady. Klyra gripped the furs tighter, claws digging into the thick fabric. Trouble, she said, tone grave as a warning. A loud thud shook the outer wall, the shelter trembling like it might collapse. Gale felt Klyra tense beside him, her breathing slowing, deliberate. Whatever was out there wasn't friendly, danger hung in the air, as oppressive as the cold. He started to sit up, but Klyra's hand shot out, seizing his arm with terrifying strength. Don't move, she hissed, barely audible. They sense motion. Gale swallowed hard, heart hammering. But we're giving off heat, he whispered, acutely aware her warmth might be a beacon to whatever lurked outside. I know, she gritted out, golden eyes fixed on the door like she could see through it. The creature roared, a deep, feral sound, followed by massive claws scraping metal, long, ear-splitting gouges echoing in the night. Gale stopped breathing, body screaming to act but pinned by her grip. Then, as suddenly as it came, the heavy steps faded into the howling wind. After an eternity, the shelter fell silent again, save for the fire's weak crackle. Gale exhaled shakily, breath clouding white. What was that? He asked, voice trembling from adrenaline and fear. Klyra released his arm, her expression unreadable, a mask over whatever she felt. One reason I don't go out at night, she said, voice even but strained. You know about them? Gale pressed, unable to hide his shock. Of course, she replied, as if it were obvious, turning away to avoid his gaze. This planet isn't just cold. It's a hunting ground. Those things out there don't care what you are, human, me, anything else. If you're warm, you're prey. Gale rubbed his face with a shaky hand, steadying himself. Perfect. If the cold doesn't kill me, those monsters will. Klyra's lips twitched, her first real smile small, laced with irony. Now you get it, human. Gale leaned back against the furs, mind spinning. He'd crashed into a frozen death trap, trapped in a shelter with a hostile alien, and out there, in the endless storm, something waited to make them its next meal. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the cold, the beasts, or Klyra's piercing stare that marked him as a burden. Gale didn't know how long he'd slept, but when he woke, the cold had sunk deeper. The furs beside him held a trace of warmth, but Klyra was gone. Panic hit like an icy surge. He bolted upright, scanning the dim shelter, heart pounding. "Klyra?" he called, voice raspy from sleep and the returning chill. No answer. The fire had dwindled to a few glowing embers, too weak to hold back the cold seeping through the gaps. Gale forced himself up, legs protesting with every move. He wrapped a thick fur around himself, its residual heat the only thing staving off renewed shivers. He shuffled to the door, noticing it ajar just enough for wind to slip in like a silent blade. He cursed under his breath. This isn't good. Bracing himself, he pushed the door open and stepped out. The wind slapped his face, a barrage of icy pins, snow swirling thick and blinding. Squinting, he searched the white void, and there she was. Klyra stood a short distance away, a faint silhouette in the storm, back to him. Her stance was rigid, arms crossed tight, but she wasn't just standing, she was watching, head tilted like a hunter scenting prey. Gale approached, snow crunching underfoot, nearly drowned by the wind's wail. "Klyra, what are you doing out here?" he shouted, voice half lost to the gale. She didn't turn, but her voice rang out, low and colder than the air. "They're back." "What?" Gale asked, dread rising. Then he heard it, a low growl, like last night's, but closer, fiercer. His pulse spiked, adrenaline flooding his veins. He peered over her shoulder, straining to see through the blizzard. At first, only snow and shadow, but then movement. At least 3 massive shapes loomed just beyond clear sight, steps slow but deliberate, predators closing in. Klyra whispered, claws flexing at her sides, golden eyes glinting in the dark. "They're testing us. Seeing how close they can get before we react." Gale swallowed, breath trembling white. "And if we don't?" She tilted her head just enough for him to catch her icy stare. "They attack." The growls grew louder, reverberating through the frozen air. Unlike last night, the beasts didn't retreat, they circled, drawing nearer. Gale clenched his fists, helplessness surging as he realized he had no weapons, no armor, just a torn suit and fading strength. But Klyra was different. Fearless. Her posture shifted, muscles coiling beneath her thermal gear, claws gleaming faintly. "I can handle it," she murmured, voice a quiet vow. Gale stared, incredulous. "You serious?" She turned, face unreadable, golden eyes piercing. "Get inside." Gale barked a shaky laugh, breath fogging. "No chance." Klyra's teeth ground, claws tightening. "You'll just get in the way. Unless you've got eyes in the back of your head, an extra pair could help." He shot back, voice firm despite the cold gnawing at him. She huffed through her nose, visibly annoyed, but didn't argue further. Instead, she faced the beasts, stance shifting to a predator's crouch, head low, body forward, claws primed. The wind screamed around them, enemies lurking in the dark, and Klyra readied for battle. Gale felt the air change, a fight was coming, and he wasn't sure he'd survive it. The wind shrieked like a wounded beast, snow whipping around them in blinding white vortices. The monsters stayed just out of clear view, their hulking shapes flickering in the storm, growls echoing like a living threat. Gale's heart pounded, each beat a war drum, every instinct screaming to run, to find cover, anything to put a barrier between him and the horrors out there. But he couldn't abandon Klyra, not out of debt, but because he knew he'd never make it alone. Klyra stood still as stone, unshaken, golden eyes blazing in the dark, watching the storm with a seasoned hunter's patience. Her body was taut as a bowstring, claws glinting under the shelter's faint light. Gale couldn't help but marvel at her calm, or rather, the latent ferocity in her every subtle move. "Got a plan?" he whispered, voice quaking from cold and adrenaline. Klyra's claws twitched, golden eyes flashing. "Don't die." Gale laughed dryly, the sound trembling in the wind. "That's your plan?" She glanced at him sidelong, a smirk flickering. You're still breathing, aren't you? Before he could reply, a shadow burst from the snowy veil. Fast, terrifyingly so, a massive beast clad in jagged volcanic armor, its thick fur spiked like ice thorns, red eyes blazing. Its jaws gaped, razor teeth gleaming like daggers, charging with horrific speed, claws pounding snow into small explosions. Gale barely reacted before Klyra moved. She blurred into motion, lunging at the beast like an arrow from a bow. The impact roared. Klyra slammed into it with unearthly force, spinning midair, claws tearing through its facial armor. A pained bellow shook the air, black blood staining the snow, the beast staggering back, eyes flaring with rage. But it wasn't over. A second beast charged from the side, aiming for Gale. He lacked Klyra's speed or claws, but instinct kicked in. He rolled aside, snow soaking his torn suit as the beast's jaws snapped inches from him. He hit the ground hard, cold biting deep, but scrambled up just as it wheeled for another strike. "Klyra!" he yelled, voice lost in the gale. Her shout cut through like a blade. "Duck!" Before he could process, she soared overhead, leaping in. She stomped its head with enough force to send it skidding, crashing into a nearby ice slab. It roared, dazed, but Klyra didn't let up. She pounced, claws flashing, slashing its throat in one swift strike. It choked on black blood, collapsing, steam rising from the corpse. Gale gasped, turning just as a third beast, bigger, fiercer, barreled at Klyra like a living avalanche. Twice the size of the others, its armor thicker, eyes like molten furnaces. Gale gaped as Klyra didn't dodge but grinned wild, almost gleeful. She leaped higher than any human could, twisting midair to evade its jaws, landing on its back with lethal precision. It thrashed, roaring, trying to buck her off, but Klyra clung on, claws sinking into its armor. Gale stood rooted, watching her raise her other hand, claws gleaming before plunging into its nape. She yanked, tearing something vital. Black blood sprayed, the beast's cry fading as its front legs buckled. With a final growl, it crashed into the snow. Still. Silence fell, save for the wind and Gale's ragged breaths. Klyra stood atop the corpse, a stark figure in the storm, breathing steady like it was routine. Gale's legs shook, heart thundering. He'd known she was dangerous, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. She didn't just survive, she dominated, a war goddess in a dead land. She turned, golden eyes meeting his. Neither spoke for a moment. Then she hopped down, brushing blood from her claws with indifference. "That'll keep them away for a while," she said, calm as if she just cleared trash. Gale exhaled, voice shaky from shock and cold. "A while? You mean there's more?" Her smirk returned, sardonic. "Always human. This is their home." Gale wiped his face with a trembling hand. "Fantastic." She stepped past him toward the shelter, voice commanding. "Move before you freeze." Gale hesitated, mind reeling from what he'd seen. Klyra wasn't just a survivor here, she was a predator, born to face death head-on. If they were getting out, he needed to understand her, not just to survive, but to fight alongside her. Back in the shelter, Gale sank near the fire, body heavy like he'd run a battlefield. He rubbed his hands for warmth, but his mind churned with what he'd witnessed. Klyra tossed the furs aside, sitting opposite him, golden eyes glinting in the fire's dim glow. She looked satisfied, not tired, not scared, just content, like a hunter after a tough kill. Gale, meanwhile, wrestled to calm his racing pulse. "You don't hold back, do you?" he said, voice rough, eyes fixed on her. Klyra's lips curled, baring sharp teeth that gleamed in the light. "You expect me to fight like a feeble human? Bow and beg those monsters for mercy?" Gale huffed, unable to argue. "I don't know what I expected, but that was something else." He paused, then added, "You enjoyed it, didn't you?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if weighing his words. "I enjoy winning," she said, voice even but laced with pride she couldn't hide. Gale studied her, probing for more beneath her guarded mask. "Is that why they exiled you?" Her smirk faded, eyes dimming for a fleeting moment. She stared into the fire, letting it answer for her. After a long pause, she spoke, voice low and bitter. My kind doesn't tolerate threats. Especially not from within. Gale frowned, curiosity flaring. You were a threat to your own people? She laughed softly, a dry, humorless sound. I was stronger than most, smarter, faster. They feared it. Called it dangerous ambition. I call it competence, the only thing that kept me alive when they dumped me here. Gale exhaled, a piece of her puzzle clicking into place. He'd seen it before in human colonies, leaders terrified of the exceptional, those who might challenge their power. So they left you here to die, he said, not a question but a conclusion. Klyra nodded, slow and firm. That was their plan. A planet no one survives, a frozen prison with no escape. They figured the cold or the beasts would finish me in days. Gale shook his head, contempt unconcealed. Idiots. She blinked, golden eyes widening. What? Your people, he said, voice hard as steel. They threw away their best shot at survival. Look at you, 3 giant monsters, and you took them down without breaking a sweat? How many of them could do that? She didn't answer, but her gaze shifted, no longer hostile, but quietly curious. Gale leaned against the cold wall, sighing. Their loss. My gain. She raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping in. You talk like that matters to me. It does, Gale said, meeting her eyes. Because when we get out of here, you'll prove them wrong. They thought you'd die, but you'll live better than any of them ever could. Klyra stared, genuine surprise breaking through for the first time since they'd met. You still think we're getting out? She asked, doubt mingling with intrigue. Gale grinned, a confident edge he wasn't sure he felt. Damn right. I'm not dying here, and I'd bet you aren't either. She shook her head, but a small, real smile tugged at her lips, no sarcasm this time. You're a fool, human. And you're terrible at saying no to help, he countered, voice softening. She looked at him, silent for a long stretch, like she wasn't used to someone taking her side. Then she smirked, voice low but steady. If I get out, having a warm-blooded fool like you around might not be the worst. But don't expect me to carry you. Gale laughed, the first real laugh since crashing. Deal. But if I find a way out, you're coming with me. Klyra tilted her head, eyes flickering like the fire. I'll consider it. But first, you've got to survive tonight. The next day, if you could call it that, on this sunless rock, dawned with the wind easing slightly, though the cold remained merciless. Gale woke in the furs, body sore but no longer shivering. Klyra was long gone from the bed, sitting by the fire, sharpening a small metal piece, maybe part of an old device with a jagged stone. She didn't look up as he stirred, but he knew she sensed him. You don't sleep much, do you? He asked, voice rough, pulling a fur over his shoulders for warmth. Sleep's a luxury here, she replied, eyes on her work. The beasts don't rest, and neither do I. Gale nodded, glancing around the shelter again. The fire's faint light revealed details he missed last night, tiny etchings, possibly alien script, along the welds. This place, you didn't make it, but it's not some random abandoned outpost either. Did the ones before you leave anything behind? Klyra's hand paused, the stone hovering over the metal. Not much, she said, voice quieter. Some tools, dried food, this shelter. But I found something else under the ice, a few 100 meters out. Gale's brows furrowed, interest piqued. What? She looked up, golden eyes assessing him. A ship. Not mine, not like yours. Old centuries, maybe. Buried, but its reactor still had power enough to keep me alive in the early days. Gale sat up straighter, adrenaline surging. A ship? Does it work? She shook her head. No. The reactor only powers heat and a few small systems. It's got a comms array. I tried signaling, but no one answered. Too old, or the storm blocks it. Gale rubbed his chin, mind racing with possibilities. If we get to it, I could fix it. I'm an engineer. My ship went down from a system failure, but I know reactors and signals. Boost it, and we might get a rescue beacon out. Klyra's lips quirked, not mocking but genuinely doubtful. You think you can do that? In this cold, with beasts prowling? I don't know, Gale admitted, voice steady despite his uncertainty. But I'd rather try than sit here waiting to die. You in? She stared at him, silent for a long beat. Then she stood, setting the metal piece down. If you want to die out there, I won't stop you. But if you make it to the ship alive, I'll go with you. Gale grinned, standing despite his aching legs. Deal. They left the shelter as the storm calmed, but the cold still bit like a living thing, tearing through Gale's torn suit and Klyra's thermal gear. She led, stride sure on the thick snow, while Gale followed, each step a trial for his drained body. The few hundred meters stretched endlessly, but they reached it, a rusted, ancient ship half sunk in ice, its scarred hull still hinting at past grandeur. Gale climbed in through a hull breach, Klyra trailing, golden eyes alert. Inside, the air was colder than outside, but the reactor, a massive metal bulk at the core, hummed faintly. Gale checked it, hands shaking from cold and excitement. It's got power, he said, voice trembling. If we amp it up, we can fire up the comms. Klyra crossed her arms, watching him work. You sure? No, he said, laughing dryly. But I've got no other options. They worked for hours, Gale jury-rigging circuits with Klyra's crude tools, her sharp ears catching every outside sound. When he finally activated the comms, a loud hum filled the air, the dim screen flickering to life. Gale punched in a rescue code, sending it into the void, clinging to slim hope someone would hear. Then a roar echoed closer than ever. Klyra tensed. They're coming. Gale looked up, heart racing. How many? Lots, she said, claws gleaming as she stepped to the door. Stay here. I'll handle it. No, Gale said, rising despite his body's protests. I'm with you. Klyra stared, surprised, then smirked. Fool. Fine. The blizzard had softened, but the wind still hissed a final warning. Inside the ancient ship, the comms buzzed, the faint rescue signal pulsing on the murky screen. Gale barely exhaled before a growl shook the ice outside. 5 colossal shapes emerged from the snow, bigger than any they'd faced. Towering like small spires, their basalt-thick armor bristled with jagged spikes, red eyes glowing like hellfire pits, each step cracking the ice beneath. Klyra blocked the ship's door, claws glinting, golden eyes fearless. Get ready, human! She snarled, voice a war cry. Gale gripped a rusted metal bar from the wreckage, heart slamming. He lacked her speed or strength, but he had his wits and he'd use them to the end. The first charged, swift as an icy tempest, claws slashing down to crush them. Klyra leaped, spinning midair like a living arrow, claws ripping its chest armor. Black blood sprayed, staining the snow, but it roared in fury, shoulder checking her into an ice slab. She hit hard but sprang up, a feral grin splitting her face. That all you got? She yelled, charging back with blinding speed. Gale had no time to gawk. A second beast lunged at him, teeth flashing. He rolled aside, snow soaking his suit as its jaws missed by inches. His mind raced, spotting a thin ice patch cracked by its weight. Klyra! He shouted, pointing. She got it instantly, leaping to stomp the ice, shattering it. The beast plunged through, thrashing, until Klyra's claws tore its throat, ending it cleanly. The last 3 didn't wait. They struck together, 1 at Klyra, 2 at Gale. He swung his bar, smacking one's snout, staggering it but not dropping it. The other raked claws overhead as he ducked, the air whistling. Klyra intervened, vaulting onto the largest, claws sinking into its nape, yanking until blood gushed. It collapsed, but flung her off, slamming her into the snow, breath heaving. Gale roared, stabbing his bar into the nearest beast's eye as it faltered. It howled, reeling, and Klyra surged up, shredding its throat in a final blow. The 5th, the biggest, roared like an avalanche, charging. Their eyes met, no words needed. Gale bolted toward the ship, luring it, while Klyra flanked. As it neared, he slid into the snow, and Klyra leaped from behind, driving both hands into its nape, tearing until it crumpled, blood steaming in the cold. Silence fell, broken only by their gasps. Gale lay sprawled, aching, blood trickling from a scratch. Klyra hauled him up, her grip firm but gentle, a rare softness. "Not completely useless," she said, voice rough but free of venom, eyes glinting with respect. Gale grinned weakly, leaning on her. "You're not half bad, Klyra." They returned to the ship, the rescue signal blinking through the fading storm. Around them, beast corpses littered the ice, proof of their defiance against cold, dark, and a ruthless universe. Two unlikely warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, awaiting salvation from the void, a stubborn human and an unbreakable alien, carving a tale of survival from the frozen abyss.